in this scenario. We'll go through some, no, totally good. Some kind of GRC misconceptions as it relates to using checklists strictly versus your personal judgment. And then, some of AI is the hot buzz topic, right? So some of evolving our personal approaches using AI. And then I'll give you just some of my own personal lessons learned type of stories. For a quick background on me, I started my career at KPMG as an IT auditor, worked a lot in financial statement audits and internal audits of a wide variety, whether it's, some cyber focus, vendor management, kind of what have you. I moved internal to an organization and oversaw IT compliance initially, but gradually took space in IT across, again, identity access management, data privacy, cybersecurity, and I currently oversee a cybersecurity function. Okay, jumping in. So here's you feel free to jump in on songs on the slides, but we've got little music clippets for each. And these are real people. They're definitely not AI generated, right? So checklist versus judgment. So this deck is offering recommendations on what does balance look like? And when we have regulatory and governance requirements, what does it look like to follow that to a T versus using, your critical thinking or flexible judgment and finding, kind of place and time where regulatory requirement following is required versus where's some flexibility. In this case, what does a checklist mean? That could be interpreted pretty widely. It could be a compliance framework. Maybe it's an audit methodology if you're an auditor. It could be policies, standards. Maybe there's, NIST or other government regulations. Could even just be your personal expectations of here's the checklist. Everything needs to be followed to a T. These are just kind of giving you general interpretations of how I'm using this. Yeah, sorry. Okay, let's stop, Dave, and do the first poll. So opinion question. Do you personally believe that there are times where you could follow more of the spirit of the law versus letter of the law? What's your personal take? Every day? Anyone else? Do you think there are times where spirit of the law? Of course, jump in. It does depend on who's doing the auditing. Yes. Yes. I'll repeat the answers too if that's helpful. Sure. Yeah, if there's not understanding and legal teams need to be asked for input. Yeah, absolutely. All right, did everyone on the online get enough time to answer?
Yeah. Here to my own rules. 71% said yes, 3% no, and 26% says it depends.
Yes, I obviously agree with the yes and the it depends. And the no, folks, I hope I encourage you to have maybe an open mind as we go through. And I'm here to, again, make up your own mind, but have an open mind. All right, let's jump back in. Lawyers in the room. I love it. Do I need to, okay, what happened here?
Perfect.
Okay. It's looking like a Black Mirror episode or something. Okay, so modern risk thinking. That's really what we're here to talk about. Modern risk thinking is not a one size fits all. And again, here I'm really asking you to think in shades of gray. So when to consider rigidity? How many of you would take a medication that somebody decided to just kind of like YOLO? They were out of one ingredient. They might just add another ingredient because, like, why not? Is anyone interested in taking that drug? I'm not. No. How about your pilot who's flying you overseas and he decided like he's a little tired, he doesn't want to follow the checklist today. Like today's maybe not the day for like, what does that button do? I don't really know. Are we cool with that? Probably not. So there are times where rigidity absolutely makes sense, right? There are certain scenarios where if it's highly regulated, your literal health and safety in your life depends on it. Of course, we're following the regulations and the guidance, of course. There are also times where there could be flexibility considered. And that's really where the shades of gray are here is, there are certain scenarios where there's not flexibility and there are some scenarios where there could be. And it's really using that critical thinking. So if it's risk appetite and approach, maybe a development and a build process, communications, marketing, of course, those are areas where there could be flexibility. And we'll get into some examples. Like the know when to hold them, know when to fold them. Yeah. So the knowing when is when, right? So what is reasonable assurance? For the auditors in the room, I'm sure you've heard, and online, of course, you've heard of reasonable assurance. And the key piece that I want to emphasize here is reasonable means reasonable. It's not 100% guaranteed. And that's what we're trying to look at here is how can you get to reasonable without being so prescriptive, so inflexible, and so rigid that you're missing kind of the spirit and the intent of the controls and whether they do accomplish your outcome. When we're so prescriptive, so here's some examples. Perhaps we're very, very rigidly holding to whether it's our audit plan, our audit methodology, or our checklist. Say maybe approvals were documented, but they approved a change that was actually problematic and brought things down in production. So yes, you got your approvals. It looked cute for the audit, but did it actually work live? Perhaps not. Here's another. So the controls may have operated effectively, but they introduced new risks or new problems to systems. So just because, and this is, kind of an audit heavy example, but just because something followed guidelines doesn't mean it was necessarily the right thing to do, or it looks clean on paper, it was properly approved, it followed the SOPs, the policies, the process. That doesn't mean it's necessarily the right thing for the organization or that it was the best decision. So what does modern risk thinking look like? In this case, here's the historical mindset of it must be enforced as it's written. More controls is less risk, heavily restricted. Security is about full prevention. Everything is locked down as tightly as possible. We don't like risk. We don't want risk. Compliance equals security. We'll get into it later, but a perfect audit report means that the organization is secure. That's a more dated mindset. Whereas in modern risk thinking, it's what is the problem we're actually trying to solve? What is the outcome? What is the goal? And what gets us there? And going back to the reasonable assurance, it's what is the intent of the control, the intent of the operations, and what could security or, practicality or failure even look like, depending on the outcome we're trying to achieve. I know I'm going through these quickly, so jump in, and I end up being a fast talker. So stop me at any point if you have any questions or want to chat through. Did you have one, Dave?
Not a question, but don't feel like you should be rushed
Sure.
because we had CCONE and stuff. So we can, if it goes a little over time,
Sounds good.
we're fine.
Now my fast talking is a personal.
Got it. Noted.
I get all quick.
Fair enough.
But thank you. Okay, so here's what works career-wise. And this is, again, from my personal experience and my own, kind of what I've seen as I've worked with folks out there in the world. Typically a person who's very rigid, very inflexible, they're, quoting, different regulations like it's scripture. Is that fun to work with? Not so much in my personal opinion, where it's, following very, very strictly the letter of the law without flexibility, without room for interpretation, without conversation about, and we'll get into some tips later in the presentation, but help me understand what's meant here. Help me understand the organizational goals here. Really that open-minded, let's talk about this, let's talk about the intent and the spirit. That's what the more modern risk thinking approach is curiosity, some creativity. How there are, like, please don't skin cats, but many ways to skin the cat, right? Like there are a lot of different ways we can get there to a successful audit, a successful outcome, by different control frameworks. Maybe it's different configurations, different settings. Having that team player mindset of, whether you're internal to or external to the organization, of being part of the solution. So if you're working inside, whether you're, level 2 or I forget the tier 1, tier 2, if you're in the risk management team, maybe you're in an internal audit department, first line of defense. Thank you. I forgot. So if you're first line, second line, third line, no matter where you are, you're all ultimately theoretically working toward the same goal. And if you're internal, you're working to the betterment of the company. So it's being part of that group of let's collectively decide what that looks like and how that looks so we can work toward that same outcome. Okay, next section. So I'm going to pause. Any thoughts, questions, pushback, other perspectives? Anyone online? Okay. Just this.
Henrik Schmidt shared that remembering that security includes availability, aka business value, aka usability.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I've got a couple examples where we'll talk about exactly that. Yeah. That little triad of the availability, integrity. Absolutely. And so being, like you said, we're part of the business. So we're all collectively, if the business is making money, we're getting our paycheck, right? So we really want to be part of the mission and the outcome because we would like to continue to get paid. This is Mr. GRC, who's very interested in his audit books.
And I just took a job as a GRC lead.
Oh, wonderful.
And I was asked, what's my goal in 6 months? And my goal in 6 months is not to be that.
You'll make, not that we're in business to make friends, but you'll make more friends that way.
Well, so it's perspective too, because
it is.
From my perspective as GRC lead, yeah, that is kind of the world I have to live in.
Of course.
But the people I'm dealing with, I don't want them to see that message.
Yeah.
I want them to be able to come and say, oh, they're helpful, or they'll provide guidance, not tell me what I can't do.
Exactly. And that's big, both in, I work in cybersecurity, as I said, but also in my compliance role of, we're not just, the shop of no, and I've got a giant no hammer and everything's an ant. It's, we're being part of the solution and supporting the business and what those goals look like. And I would say, this cybersecurity specifically, but it's a spectrum between tight security controls and end user experience. And you can crank that cyber control and you get further and further away from a positive end user experience. So it's really understanding that, the business risk tolerance and, like you said, the business appetite, what makes sense from the industry, the controls, and, really how the business feels. And another piece that you mentioned that I love is, understanding your end users and kind of how do they feel about, of course, they're going to be audited if they're working in, maybe they're the DBA and you have to go ask them to run lists. A big thing for me is helping them understand the why. And I'm perhaps the middleman between IT and the auditors. And I'm doing that, translation. Here's the why. I'm bringing you along on the journey. It's not just do it because I said so. So it is really being that strategic business partner. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Okay, so here's our next opinion poll, David. Are you open to considering scenarios where following the playbook might actually weaken security? Yes, no, maybe. Yes, no, open to considering. Yeah, I'm joined in the Zoom, so it's okay, but I don't know if can we pull this one up online? Do we know that you, David? A lot of these are the cheat is it depends, right? It always depends. Yes, it is the lawyer answer. Are we good online? Can we jump forward? Do we want to give folks a little more time to respond? Yes, no, it depends. Okay, no, folks, I'm so curious to hear from you at the very end of what your perspective is and if you've changed your mind. Okay, so here's some examples. So this one is the GRC because we've always done it that way. That's not a control. That doesn't make us secure. Like this is the way we've always done it. That I would challenge all of us to say the reality in the modern risk thinking way is just because we've always done it that way doesn't mean it's the right way to do things. So again, no control failures, having a perfect clean audit doesn't mean there wasn't risk. It doesn't mean there wasn't something we missed. Doesn't mean there was a gap. We maybe just didn't open the closet that had the skeleton in it, right? Like there could be something that we missed just because you have a clean audit doesn't equal security, doesn't equal compliance. Frameworks don't always guarantee effectiveness. Some folks get so tied down and again, following the letter of the law, checking the checklist, I've got to get my tasks done and I did all the things, but you're missing something that's kind of outside the box or another area of risk or those conversations that could have, kind of opened the door to what else is going on in the business and the environment. So really the reality is you can be compliant and without control failures, but you're still, like this says, exposed to potential risks, whether that's, emerging cyber threats, behavioral risk. Like, yes, maybe everybody took their cybersecurity training this year and you have a perfect compliance, but Susie's over here clicking links, right? So just, checking all the boxes doesn't equal security. Yeah, of course.
So Olivia Bosch asked, is this where policy exceptions come into play?
Yeah, I think policy exceptions, certainly. So that's an example from the last place I worked. There was, in my risk management role, you become more of an advisor and a consultant. And I'm getting to the policy exception piece with this of, I would tell the business, they would come to the risk management function. Here's what we're trying to do. Here's what we're trying to take on. I would say, well, it's actually against policy section 4.2, whatever, right? I understand what you're trying to do. I understand the goal. And let's exactly to that point, create a policy exception and accept the risk. And a lot of that is it will introduce risk to the environment, but it's understanding what that looks like. Are there mitigating controls? Are there other monitoring pieces we can put into play? And then supporting the business with their goals where it makes sense. So absolutely, I agree. Policy exceptions are, they should be considered. Anyone else? Perfect. Okay. GRC, that bottom piece, and back to the Mr. GRC with all his checklist books. In my personal opinion, I really believe there's more success when it's less a policing function and running around with your no hammer and more of really a strategic advisor and being a team player and part of the business. Okay, so here's the no, folks. Let me know what you think about this. But a lot of the audit playbooks require an 8-character password that rotates every 90 days. That is outdated. NIST does not recommend that you change your password every 90 days. And why? Because they're just adding a 1, a 2, an exclamation mark to the end. They're writing it on a Post-it. They're using the same password over and over for all their different accounts. Current NIST guidance is that longer is better. So we're using a passphrase, not a password, and that you don't change the password unless there's been a compromise. And of course, you need the monitoring and detection controls to know when it's been compromised. But this is a case where by using what the audit methodology says of that 8-character password rotating every 90 days, that actually puts the end users at more risk because they're more prone to using weaker passwords in those cases. Of course, MFA. Everyone should be using MFA on all your accounts, period, no exceptions at this point. Yeah, jump in.
So luckily, it's been a couple years since I've had to deal with external auditors, but a couple years ago, we would challenge the external auditors on this and ask them to adjust their audit procedures, and it was a challenge. And I'm curious, Lisel, you or others in the room, this is a great configuration control example that I think comes up frequently now, especially with the new NIST guidance. But what have you all seen? How have those conversations been going?
I've seen the same thing. There's a lot of hesitancy for the auditors to be flexible in the approach, where it is exactly what I'm talking about here. The guidance says this. I get that. And the guidance is outdated. So I don't know, anyone else? Have you had experience in this? I find that folks are willing to hear me out, but then I understand they may also be stuck between a rock and a hard place too, where perhaps they're held to a standard that they have to audit against, and they're not the ones who, wrote PCAOB guidance or what have you. Yeah.
Is this recommended for local admin passwords too? Because I know a lot of policies, they like automatically rotate it, but it's like random letters and numbers as well.
I would say it depends. It depends on who has access, who has local, if local admin is restricted only to administrator laptops, if all your end users are having local admin, then I would not. I would definitely lock that down. It depends. It's not a great answer, but that is what I would say. Longer and stronger for any sort of privileged account is always, service accounts, local admin accounts. It should be certainly I would 16, 20 plus characters. It needs to be a long and strong password in a vault.
And along with that, one thing I've noticed talking to a lot of auditors recently, especially because I'm working towards my CCP and I'm working with CMMC a lot more, just being in communication.
Right.
So a lot of auditors, like CCAs, CCA leads, even the C3PAOs from NIST and stuff, just bouncing those ideas and really getting down into the nitty gritty of why we believe this and why we don't.
Yes.
And then just asking the fundamental governance, people, why is this a good reason? This is not a good reason, and why? And something with that ISOC is putting into play that we talked about a few weeks at the West Summit for CMMC is that there can be a knowledge base that's going to be put in play and through ISOCA for all of this stuff for NIST. So it's collaborating and putting this stuff together so we can get those guidances specific to this, because as we know, a lot of these cybersecurity frameworks are very vague.
Yeah.
And so for us to be able to collaborate is very important.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, here's another example. So say you're working at a very small company, there's maybe an IT staff of 2, a finance team of 5. Do you think there's going to be perfect segregation of duties? There won't be, I promise you. There will not. So strict segregation of duties and expecting that every step of the process is performed by a different person, there's no different person to do the thing. So their strict segregation of duties, again, is not going to happen. So what does that look like? Again, I love your point on communication. I've got some more slides toward the end about communication. It's really talking with, management with that team of, in this case, what are the review controls? What does segregation of duties look like between someone's developing, the other may implement. Perhaps there's a third party oversight at the end to give it an approval. So again, back to, the beginning, that creativity piece, that's really what's required of what's the spirit of what this is trying to achieve, accepting, again, to the reasonable assurance is not 100% guaranteed. What is reasonable in this scenario when we've got 2 IT people, we've got 5 finance people? Expecting perfection is you're going to be disappointed. So it really is about getting creative and working with the teams. Yeah.
We have Frank Delker online who states that some security folks have indicated that NIST is moving away from longer and pushing for other stronger controls. Is that true? Maybe it's going to be replaced by MFA or passkeys or some combination?
Passkeys are definitely the up and coming thing for sure. Yeah. And I strongly encourage passkeys. I use them myself. So multi-factor authentication, period, use it on I use it on, banking, social media, every account that you have in your personal and professional life. If you take nothing away today, please run, don't walk, and put MFA on all your things. That's huge, of course. And honestly, I would say that's not even up and coming. That's a baseline requirement at this point. But passkeys, absolutely. That's replacing a lot of kind of the standard or the historical username and password type of authentication. And it goes more toward that zero trust type of approach where, it's reevaluating authentication, reevaluating, your login, your identity while as you're working. Hopefully that answers the question. Okay, so we touched on this a little bit earlier, but things must stay the same is the dated concept. So you're expecting, to the general IT controls or the environment, this is what it was last year. We had 13 controls last year. We're going to have 13 controls this year. Does that actually make sense? Again, this comes back to the practical and the reasonable approach of, let's re-review annually. What's changed about the business? What's changed about the threat landscape? What's changed about the business goals? What are perhaps our risk appetite has changed because the company's made an acquisition. It's really having that spirit and that mindset of, continued learning, continued growth, change, and retiring, could retire old controls, old mindsets. Having a long list of just because you checked all these controls doesn't mean you've mitigated all the risk. It could be, again, like we said earlier, that you've, missed a key piece by not having had those conversations. Can you think of any other examples? People who are no folks, I would love to hear if you have any sort of different perspective now. It's okay if you don't.
Yeah, sorry to keep talking, but I'm going through this stuff a lot right now, especially in policy being vague or even just putting in things in play reviewing policy every year, right? But then doing it quarterly or things like that. So you got to stay up to date with this stuff because things constantly change.
Yes.
Even your SOPs, your procedures. Like one day you might be on Okta, next thing, or you might be on one login, then you migrate to Okta, and everything has to be rewritten,
Absolutely.
right? So unless you take the time in our space to rewrite these policies, procedures, and even do tabletops on them and involve the right people into it, then you're just checking a box instead of being adaptable, actually protecting the organizations and companies you're working with and for.
Definitely. I totally agree. Yeah, it's that continued evaluation. Any others? Okay, so let's jump into AI enabling your personal approach. It's our last poll question. So have you incorporated AI into your personal approach? No, no worries, no worries. This is Mr. Not interested in AI. No bots. He wants the, I don't even know what is it a gramophone? I think the polling question is still coming up, folks online. There we are. So of course, dated concept. All my AI bots are doing all the things for me. Maybe you're tinkering and dabbling. Or are you Mr. Gramophone raging against the machine and AI will not be doing things for you?
Just to share with you online, 73% are tinkering and dabbing. 19% of course work, that's a dated concept. And we do have 5 Luddites that have no, 4 now, 4%, 2 people. Yeah, sorry. And then 5 that had said other.
Thank you. Thank you. Of course.
I like your, I mean, my question is, do you think people should be doing AI? Okay. I mean, to be honest, I mean, most people I work with these days are like, you can't do the job without it now.
I don't know that I would say you can't. Sorry. Why not? Okay. I'm going to just double check and make sure nope. Sorry, Struggle City. Okay, the question is, should we be using AI? In my personal opinion, yes. And even if it's a matter of just, that kind of tinkering and dabbling, well, I do think some of the AI usage is buzz and it's, the hot topic, and some of it's FOMO and everyone's trying to do AI just because, Joe Schmo is also doing AI. I do think there's some of that, and it's not going away. It's only going to persist. I've seen AI written into job descriptions where folks are looking for AI persons at the organization now, which tells me we need to evolve our career, our personal approach, our life, because AI is not going away. So if you've not already started, I would really encourage exploring it, even just for personal use, just to kind of get out there and, dip your toes in the AI water. Again, because it's not going away. That's my personal take. I for a lot of the use, I don't know that this is universally true, but I like to say, I don't know that AI will take your job, but someone who knows AI just might. So a lot of the jobs are evolving to use AI, and we want to make sure we're adapting and evolving our own personal approach and our skill set accordingly. Again, that's my own hot take. So the best way to incorporate AI in is just get started. Just jump in and start using it. And here's the example. Are there different ways to more strongly secure authentication rather than just using an 8-character password? So that's what we talked about. So if you've not jumped into using, say, a ChatGPT or an AI example, again, the security person in me said, like, don't tell it your home address, where you live. That's feeding the global LLM that will now have all of your personal information. Like, be cautious, use it with care. Don't give it everything about your personal self. But really do get in there and play. And I'll give you some examples of what that might look like. So here's some areas where you could tag AI in for support. So maybe some research. So if you're trying to understand, like even in that same password example of what's the current guidance, what are other folks doing out there for password settings? Maybe it's a new regulatory or kind of up and coming governance framework. There's and what's the CMMC is kind of up and coming from a Fed perspective, right? This would be a great tool to help you research. It's like Google on steroids, if you will. It's really helpful for building new. So if you're creating new policies, you're designing a new program, maybe you're right sizing your approach, use AI to kind of pressure test your thoughts and your processes. Driving efficiency. So a lot of the times like if it's not clear, I'm a little verbose. So I'll, have written something and I'll drop it into ChatGPT or say Copilot and say, how could I make this more efficient? And I promise you it'll be cut down 50% because I will have repeated myself as I'm writing this big long paragraph, right? So it's really just kind of that sanity check to bounce ideas off of it. Maybe you could use it from an audit perspective of, identifying inconsistencies, mapping control frameworks. Say you're an organization that, has a set of controls, but you have to comply with, say, HIPAA, maybe FERPA, GDPR, you've got all of these different regulatory requirements. Well, a lot of those controls are going to be the same across and apply to each of those regulations. Use AI to help you with that, to do that kind of mapping and to find where something might be missing. It's also going to be great at identifying deviations and anomalies more so than our human eyes are. One of my security vendors says, give AI the low brain work so that we can work on the high brain work. So have it work on identifying those deviations, those discrepancies, so you yourself are not scrolling through thousands and thousands of rows in Excel, ruining our eyes, right? Like that's a great type of thing to give to AI. From a personal perspective, very similarly, it's your own private tutor. So again, for those new and up and coming regulations, ask it. So maybe there's a question you're not comfortable asking in your organization because you're new or you're just starting your career. Do some research with AI. What is this regulation? What does it mean? What are examples on how to test? What are some ways that I should write this up? What are kind of key business processes? What are other folks doing? My little screen here is blocking my little Destiny's Child picture. How dare. And really helping with preparation. So another way I like to use AI is, kind of checking myself and in prep of here's my stance, convince me I'm wrong. So again, it's that, this rigid mentality thinking, just because I have a perspective on a certain something or how something is tested, ask AI either defend this stance or prove me wrong, to kind of really pressure test your own thoughts, your own thinking and your approach by using ChatGPT as that kind of, devil's advocate, if you will. Other thoughts? Are there other ways folks are using AI that would be helpful to share with the group? Yeah, right next, Alan's just next to you.
It says right on the page in Microsoft Copilot, AI makes mistakes.
Of course.
But what I found is even when AI points me to an authority that doesn't exist, it still helps me find the right thing.
Yes, yes. And that's a great reminder. I've got that in the next slide. AI does make mistakes. And we've seen examples where I forget how long ago it was, but there was a lawyer who wrote a briefing using only AI. And do you remember that? What was in the briefing was just, AI was on some nonsense, making things up. Yeah. So you really need to be careful using it as gospel truth. It needs to be fact checked. Yeah.
And along with that, just like, I've been working in AI for a little bit now because we all have been. And, my last place I was at, I even made policies for like a policy bot where I just implemented my policies internally inside of my stack and it's secure. And from there, if people had any questions on policies, they can ask the bot, and
Yeah.
it pulled up from documentations that I had written and that I had put in place. And so it made it easier for us when we went through audits, questionnaires, et cetera. And then even my team was able to utilize it.
Yeah.
So it comes down to like any person is if you're just hiring someone, right? You're not just going to throw them into the deep end and expect them to succeed. So you provide the right documentations for AI, right? The right information, and it's more likely to less likely to have hallucinations.
Definitely. Yep. And if you're not quite comfortable using it from professional perspectives, try some personal use. I've heard some cool examples where someone, I think they used a picture actually. It was either a picture or listed out, here are the things I have in my refrigerator right now, write me a recipe using these things. Or there was another person that would say, they used it as kind of a travel guide, a travel planner of, I'm going here on these dates, tell me what to wear, what to pack, what activities to do. Like it could be used as kind of a personal assistant type thing. And one area I've used it for myself, if I'm, really struggling, and we'll get into kind of some personal lessons learned of, I'm have to have a difficult conversation. This is a really tough situation. AI is very logical. It's very fact-based. It doesn't have the feelings, right? So it helps me put together a framing of the conversation, the situation in a very logical, rational way that kind of helps me step outside of the situation that I'm, maybe 2 heads deep in and gives another perspective. So I'd encourage, just kind of get in there, play with it, see where it could be of use to you. Using AI, so this is geared toward the professional situation. If you're early in your career and you've used AI to kind of help you, I wouldn't necessarily be shouting that from the rooftops. Like at the end of the day, what you put together and you present to your executives, to your management, you need to own that. So whatever AI has told you, what it's helped you put together, again, to the point of it does have hallucinations. You need to review that. You need to clean it up, and you need to own it as your own. And it's great that you've maybe used AI behind the scenes, but and you could, maybe talk to that casually, but I wouldn't personally be out there advertising that like, hey, I wrote this whole policy and I didn't do any of it. Like that's not the best look from an ownership and accountability perspective. Again, if you can't explain it on your own, don't use it. If AI's put something together, it doesn't make sense to you, you have no idea what it's talking about. Again, I wouldn't put my name on that and send it out as gospel truth. Like you really need to own it and to understand what you're delivering, what you're putting out there. Use it to think clearly. So you're not just trying to look smarter, or it's, in my example of having it clean up my emails, I'm not having it write my emails. I'm having it kind of fact check and clean up and, go through what I've already written. I'm still owning and I'm accountable for what I'm putting out there in the world. I may just be using AI to, kind of help me out. Like AI may or may not have pulled in some of these song lyrics. This one was me, but some of the song lyrics it's little things like that where it can help you. Yeah, go ahead.
And this is Alex here. I just wanted to say that if you let AI take your voice, then you won't really have much of one.
Yeah, love that.
I teach at ASU, and this semester's been really bad. We have a lot of students, maybe like 1/3 of the class, they've used AI, and it's just so obvious. I mean,
right.
You can see the dashes in the text. It has absolutely no character at all in anything that's being written, and it gets pretty obvious on the other side. So these tools are great. You definitely have to leverage them. But at the same time, don't let it take away your voice because it's noticeable and it's something that will not be taken well by the other side.
Yeah. And I like you said that it's a tool. That's just it. It's a tool to help us, but it's not yet running the show. Like, stay tuned, and we're Terminator and who knows how long. That's a joke. But exactly. It's keeping that humanity, keeping that accountability. I totally agree.
I was just going to echo that, where it is a tool,
Right.
and you don't want to just delegate everything to the hammer.
Yes.
And hope for the best.
What else? Anyone else? Thoughts?
A couple of people online. So we have Nia Richard. She said, for AI, verify the results and reword the prompt for tighter and more realistic results.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if I need to verify references, I have it verify the reference it came up with, and then I ask AI to generate it first. We have Kevin Zempko, who said, I took a 4-week AI ML course via Federal Skilling Academy. Very, very good praise of it. Last, we have Steve Campion, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing any names wrong. He said, I asked AI to create a picture of a Chevy van. It produced a beautiful picture of a Volkswagen van with a Chevy emblem on the grill. So make sure that you check AI in its output. And last, Olivia Bosch says, some teachers let students use AI for essays, but also ask the student to show how they can improve the output.
Yeah, I love
Which is
that.
a very interesting approach.
I've heard some people use different AI tools to fact check the AI tool. Like, they'll have Copilot generate something and then ask ChatGPT to validate that, and then ask Claude to validate that. So having it kind of cross-reference, but still I would put human eyes on all that. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I'll jump into some of my personal lessons learned, and then we'll wrap up. So, really something I've learned over time is being confident enough I love what Alex said, to use your voice. So we all have different perspectives. We've all got different backgrounds. We're bringing our unique experiences to the table. And that's what benefits the organizations, is that diversity of perspective and of experience. So just because we've always done things a certain way doesn't mean it makes sense to continue that. And if you're new to an organization, you're bringing in that fresh set of perspectives and fresh set of eyes. Don't be afraid to speak up and to say, hey, even if it's in a curious way, oh, I'm interested in this. I'm curious about this. Tell me more. Like, you don't have to come in with like, this is wrong. This sucks. Like, this is not what the guidance says. It's that curiosity of like, oh, interesting. Tell me more. It's okay. Again, I just talked about fresh set of eyes, asking questions, asking why. What is this? What's the goal here? What's the likelihood? So if, an organization has this long list of, actually, one of the last companies I joined, I came in and had this risk and control matrix that was a mile long for a tiny company. I'm like, who wrote this? What was the goal here? What are each of these controls trying to address? And are they really helping mitigate the risk? Is there a way we can kind of weed this down? And, what's, kind of the minimum viable product to get us both secure, to get us to, meet the requirements, but not be boiling the ocean with every control that exists out there. So it's, really, again, love the M&M taking a stand, like, what's your voice, really evaluating and processing, what's the goal here and how can I support that goal? That said, here's the devil's advocate to this piece. When your voice is stark contrasted against everyone else and maybe the company's risk appetite, like, you're the complete outlier, I do truly believe that there's a place and time where you need to fall in line, for lack of a better word. Like, I'm not the C-level executive. I'm not the CEO of the company. So I can have a perspective on what the risk is, but to the point of policy exceptions, at the end of the day, I'm not the one determining the business strategy, the roadmap, where this organization is going. I can make recommendations and provide guidance, but if they choose not to follow that guidance, that's the business's decision. And my role is to support them. And perhaps it's a policy exception, maybe it's mitigating controls, but it's really knowing when is when of, and I've seen this in my past where there are some folks who dig their feet in so hard that, it really causes more friction than it achieves business outcome. And to what end? Again, it's, I don't like I had someone tell me in my last role that I told them to bend the knee. And I'm like, well, first of all, at the time, I didn't even know what that meant, but like, you have to understand that you can have all of these perspectives. And in that example, it was, I've heard you, I've heard your approach, but this is what our CIO is asking us to do. And at the end of the day, it's his program, it's, his department to run. I understand you disagree, but this is what we're going to be doing because this is what he's asked us to do. And there's a place and time where that's appropriate, and that's what you need to do. So use your voice, yes, and know when is when of when it's okay, I'm going to follow the CIO's guidance, even though it may not necessarily have been the way I would have done it. Okay, here's more examples of, like I mentioned, I've had a few, past career experiences where someone's really digging their feet in. And this is more on like the soft skill side and kind of the psychological perspective. I apologize, it's a bit of a word soup. But I really try to understand why. And it's coming back to the humanity piece of, I'm curious what's behind that. Like, have they been in a situation like this before? Have they had a negative experience or a terrible audit outcome that left, like, are they in fear? Are they so afraid of what's going to happen that they're digging in deep on these controls and the regulations because maybe they got fired at their last job for not having followed it? It's what happened in their past and what are they bringing to the table that's causing this, kind of friction and difficulty. And that's where I really try to step back from, like the humanity piece of like, help me understand this. This really seems to be a sticking point. Can you kind of talk me through your thought process? Help me understand, what's going on here. This seems like, we're kind of butting heads and I'm curious what's behind it. So again, help me understand the backstory. It seems like there's more to this story. Having some of those conversations and to your point, the communication has really helped me when someone's super stuck in that rigidity and not interested in a more flexible approach. Here are some of the conversation expanders that are my favorites that I just talked about. So it's like, oh, interesting. Tell me more. It's really having that curiosity mindset of not, again, we're going to do it because I said it this way. You're quoting regulation like subsection 2A II. It's the like, oh, interesting. I'm curious for your thought process. Tell me what was behind that. I haven't seen it done that way before. I'd love to hear more about this. It's really approaching with curiosity. And it's that you attract more flies with honey type of approach, right? Where, having those conversations and the open communication has really gotten me so much farther than saying, we're going to do this thing because SOX says that we're going to do the thing. Yeah.
And a question on the conversation expanders. You say, risk-based decision you may not be aware of. And I go back to what did they do to make that risk-based decision? That's part of what you need to, as an auditor, that's what I would look at.
Absolutely.
And I've actually argued it that, hey, we made a decision and this is what we did to make the decision.
Exactly.
And it's not wrong.
Right.
So that's where I'm like,
why. Help me understand.
You can make risk-based decisions, just make sure you have something to back it up.
Exactly. Yeah, it's the why behind it. Like, take me along on your journey. I'm sure there were, conversations. Probably if the organization is meeting heavy, I'm sure a lot of folks met and talked about this thing. Like, help me understand how you got there, what's behind it, and what was driving it. Yeah, there's someone, Dave Beck.
I think this kind of ties in with your last slide, but I've been in a situation where this has been helpful also for the self-reflection, where just because you disagree and you're pretty sure you're right doesn't mean you always, even if you're confident, don't let that get in the way of you reflecting on yourself, because everyone can be in this situation. Try to have empathy in that situation is something I would recommend.
Absolutely.
And you could also be incorrect, even if you're arguing, and don't be afraid to change your opinions.
Totally. And that's exactly what I was trying to say here. Like, you may be like super stuck in like, I truly, truly believe this is right. But when I'm I guess not the common denominator, I'm the outlier and everyone else is the rule. It's like weird. I'm the only one standing on this island by myself and everyone else feels something different. Maybe time to like reflect on myself. Yeah.
And sometimes you might just be right, but then organizationally or in, the companies, they just can't do it at that time,
100%.
And so that's where it comes into documenting these risks, what we're assuming as a risk, ways around the risk,
Yep.
And then also when we might be able to talk about this risk again, and being able to be flexible in our field is important. Be able to at least have this stuff documented so that we know organizationally what direction we need to go. We can't do everything at the same time.
Yes.
Right? But we can try to at least document what we know is a high risk and then, attack it in order.
Absolutely. I think about that in cyber a lot too, that, there's a server with, say, 360 vulnerabilities, and we've got those two poor IT resources by themselves. Of course, we can't do all the things today. I would love to. I'd love to fix absolutely everything, implement every technology, but it has to be a risk-based decision to that point. And then you've got risk that you're accepting. So what are your mitigating controls, knowing that you in fact did not fix all the things?
Yeah, I think anyone in a GRC, and especially a compliance role, they're not going to get very far, and they're not going to be very successful if they take the parenting approach of, because I told you so.
Yes, agreed.
Right? That doesn't usually go over. Doesn't go over well with my kids, and it doesn't go over well with your colleagues or your clients either. And I think we've all seen time and time again, and I think the best auditors that I've worked with are those that will listen and that will take, audits can always be a bit adversarial, but when you have a dialogue around it, both parties will feel like they're heard, and you'll be successful, even if you don't always get what you want, right? Because you won't.
Right.
You won't. And if you're too rigid, I think oftentimes you won't be there. I was just talking to a client yesterday who was working with their QSA for their PCI audit, and they went a minor version change for PCI. Like, don't quote me, but like 4.1 to 4.2, something like that. And the auditor that they were working, the QSA that they were working with, was so rigid and inflexible, and they ended up swapping out the QSA from the same firm. They threatened to switch firms, which that can hurt. And so, yeah, it won't serve you well if you're too rigid, or if you're in that compliance audit seat.
Absolutely. Yes.
But we still have to uphold and maintain integrity and all those things. But these are good, healthy conversations we can have.
Definitely. And remembering there are people behind it that, they're trying to do their best in their job. I had, at my last organization, my team I had identity access management, and they just had a heck of a time deprovisioning users completely and accurately. And I had one say to me, like, do you think I show up every day and try to do a bad job? And I'm like, well, no, like, of course not. To that point, it made me stop and realize, like, oh, I hate that if she thinks that was the impression that I gave. We're all trying to show up and do our best. We've all, got rent or a mortgage to pay. We've got food to put on the table. We're trying to put gas in the car, right? Everyone's trying to do their best. And what is the reasonableness? So I think understanding the humanity and being open to having those conversations while trying to understand where people are coming from. It's sometimes in the moment, it's hard to remember that when, you're triggered or feelings are hot or the auditor's adversarial. It's, taking that time to kind of step back and remember, like, there could be a conversation. There's a way to get through this. Yeah.
Heinrich Schmidt added something that I think I also resonates really well with me, and that is that risk is not for risk, audit, and security assessors, practitioners to accept or not.
Yeah.
It's a governance role, and ultimately it's up to senior leadership to determine whether or not the risk is acceptable for the organization.
100%. A lot of us even internally in risk management, we're still in a consulting capacity where we're presenting the risk to the organization. And to your point, it's up to them to decide what's acceptable. Absolutely. So like, that's the, not getting it twisted. I'm not the king of the kingdom saying we're not accepting this risk. That's not my job. Maybe if I'm the CEO, perhaps, but it's remembering that place. I know we're over time, so I'm going to try to wrap up real quickly. These are some of for folks, kind of earlier in your career, some of the things I wish I knew earlier is that a lot of it's not personal. So while I just talked about thinking about humanity, the humanity in people, I took it so personally if there were control failures. There was an exception, like I personally failed and I suck at life because, this control failed. That is not the case. Like, it's still a business. There are teams and groups. Remembering that, yes, we're here to do a job, and most of us take a lot of pride in our work and our work product and the work quality. And it doesn't mean that, we suck as a person if something has gone wrong. Changing your mind is great. folks who were all of the no's in the polls, I'm so curious if you've changed your mind in any way. I would strongly advocate for, always in all areas of our life, being open to new perspectives. You don't have to change your mind, but be curious, be open to hearing a different approach. Even if you are dead set in thinking you're right, just hear people out and you might learn something interesting. That's something that has helped me. It's great. It doesn't mean that you were wrong before or you dropped the ball before when you believe this certain thing. It means that you were evolving and you're growing, and we all should be continuously. And the value, again, I mentioned earlier that diversity of perspective. Alex mentioned exactly this, that not using your voice limits that quality. Don't rob others and the work product of your voice. You're here for a reason. These organizations have brought you in to fill a role. They want to hear what you have to say because you're providing that value. So don't let the work product miss out on the quality of what contributions you would bring to it. All right, I'm going to do a couple quick takeaways and then, yeah. So again, this is a very opinion heavy slide deck, but in my personal opinion, I really think, that rigid checkbox thinking will limit you more than it will help you. Modern thinking really requires that creativity, that flexibility, really an open-mindedness. And I really encourage you to start using AI to elevate your approach, whether that's personally, professionally, and otherwise. The end, yes.
So speaking about opinions, I would love to hear your opinion on, as IT systems are evolving from mostly applications to now agentic AI solutions, how do you see GRC evolving to keep up with that?
Yeah. I mean, the AI still needs to be reviewed and needs to be audited. And, I think as practitioners, we need to be evolving our approach of how we can use those tools as well. But it's, kind of checking the AI. There's some red teaming tools that are coming out to penetration test and, kind of hack the AI, if you will, to make sure that what it's producing is, complete, accurate, reliable. So as I think in my opinion, GRC practitioners need to understand the tools, understand what it's doing, understand the business outcomes, and then we can review, is AI doing what it was intended to do? Is it actually producing the outcome that we were wanting it to produce? I don't know if anyone else has thoughts or perspective on that as well. I also know we're at time, and I'm not offended if you need to duck out. Please do what you need to do. Other questions, thoughts, comments? Yeah. No, people, if you did not change your mind, that is okay. Diversity of perspective. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Just beyond some of the lessons you shared with us today, in following your journey from an IT auditor at KPMG to moving internally, are there any callouts or lessons that you picked up from that time that you felt were beneficial or different in those two roles?
Yeah, for sure. A lot of how I got to move around was saying yes and saying, I think do your work really well and kind of that delivering on what was on my plate showed, my leaders that they could trust me to take on new things. And they would come to me and say, hey, I don't have anyone to run business continuity. Can you do that? I said, I don't have any idea how to do that, but yeah, I'm in. Let me figure it out. Let me go do some research. That's how I got cyber. It's how I got data privacy. So for me, it's been a lot of saying yes, delivering well on the thing, and then you'll be a trusted resource that they will continue to come to. Of course, don't overpromise and underdeliver. So when you're saying yes, don't take on more than you can actually deliver on. But that's something that's really helped me. And I think that goes to the open-mindedness of, I don't know how to do that thing, but I'm curious. I'll dig in, I'll do some research, and I'll figure it out. Yeah. Good. Okay. I know we ran over. Thanks for being here. Awesome. Yeah, thank you.